Windows.
Oh yeah. Oh wait, actually, that reminds me. I'm probably gonna have to plug in my headset. I didn't even think about that.
All right, and we're live. And if we have anybody actually watching this, if we could get some yays or nays on the audio, which would probably entail Tyler saying some words.
Me saying words. I am saying words right now. Matt, if I could get you to also talk, because I'm gonna try to see if I need to plug in my headphones.
Well, I also have some words. They're not really good words, and there's a lot of, bad words interspersed in there, but, words.
Oh,
So
it's not capturing it. I don't need to plug in my headset. Yeet. Thank you, Windows. Not like it's a good thing, but like it genuinely, this upsets me so much. Windows has a massive amount of money behind it, and yet there is nothing like an echo cancellation module like for their sound thing like there is on Linux.
So
like
when
we shit on Pulse Audio a lot, and Windows doesn't even have basic functionality that's in Pulse Audio. What?
So let me get this straight. When I get the Audacity recording from you later, I'm not going to hear myself in the background, am I?
No.
'Cause I'm pretty sure I just did.
I just tested it, and that should not happen because it didn't pick up any waveform when you were talking.
Because if that happens, I'm blaming you because it actually would be your fault.
Yes.
For not using a real man's operating system.
Look, I'm only here for Deadside, and I swear it upsets me because I love Deadside so much. Like it's a great survival game. It's fantastic. Also, they have it on sale right now, so if you want to get it, go ahead and get it. But
I would die before I used Windows.
Look. All right, here's the thing. For game development, Windows is obviously where it's at because the Linux method for like Steam and everything is just Proton taking care of like the whole idea of Proton is like for game developers, don't worry about switching because that's too much of an ask for a lot of game development studios. So like instead of asking them to take on more work and everything, just develop for Windows and Steam and Proton will take care of everything. I think that's a great idea. The only thing though is some game developers, like with especially multiplayer games like Deadside, they are using anti-cheat services, and now easy anti-cheat, you could just enable an option that would allow it to work through Proton, and they still don't do it. And that's what gets me about Deadside, because it's a super small team, and I understand that, but also, damn it, boys, press the freaking button. Just press it. I want to be able to play you on Linux, and then we're good. We're all good. Like literally, that's the only reason I still use Windows is for Deadside. That's it.
Sure.
Well, I mean, GTA 5 works. I mean, like most stuff works.
It has nothing to do with you being Bill Gates',
Dude, come on, how can you even say you're the one who got me off on that Microsoft rant on my channel?
I know.
I had by the end of that rant, there were half dozen people please.
Just because he's your daddy doesn't mean you don't have daddy problems. I mean. Okay, that's good.
Tomatoes at the Windows machine. Look, I'm not big on Windows. It's still better for some games because they just don't support it. That's it.
It's okay.
I will be booting into my OpenBSD machine here shortly because I do want to do some more stuff, and I want to see because I have yet to watch your video. I've been saving your video on the window manager DK or whatever. I'm kind of excited to watch that video. The only reason I haven't is because I've heard from now about 5 people that it's really good and you're definitely going to like it. And I haven't watched it because I'm I don't need to try a whole new window manager first thing in OpenBSD. It's probably not a great idea.
It's It's like if you took DWM and mashed it together with BSPWM and i3. Like all together. It's a dynamic tiler, so it's different than i3, but it uses the same kind of like it's not the same kind of like ease of use of like customization because it uses the shell scripting of BSPWM and it has the, like the BSPC style thing in it. But it's really good.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna like that. That sounds really appealing.
The biggest downside I've found so far is that it has scratch pads, but it's kind of a hacky scratch pad. It's just a script for scratch pads, so it doesn't really work all that well, sadly. But you can have as many workspaces as you want, like literally as many as you want. That's where the i3 thing comes in. Like you can have. I said it to 20, and I was like, yes, so good.
So ridiculous, man.
Yeah,
Jesus.
it's good stuff.
You enjoy your workspaces too much. Too much. I mean, I say that, but you got to have a use for all that 64 gigabytes of RAM, you know? Got to.
We're having some issues with buffering on the stream. I'm not sure what the hell's going on there or how to fix it because I'm getting green in OBS.
Yeah, everything on my end looks good.
So I'm getting a warning here, and I saw somebody say buffering in the chat. So if it is buffering for you, I apologize for that.
Wait, are you getting a warning in YouTube?
Yeah, it says error.
Yeah,
YouTube
don't
is not...
pay attention to that. That means absolutely nothing.
All right.
I used to get that, like it happens super randomly and it means nothing. Because I've been live streaming before and had that warning and asked people, like, is there any problem? And like 7 people came back like, no, it's all good.
One guy said, David said it was buffering for him. But I don't see anybody else saying anything. Windows
causing buffering.
It's definitely Tyler's fault. Yeah, definitely.
just blame it on Windows. Yeah. I mean, it's all that telemetry running in the background, you know? It affects stuff.
Well, there's no bandwidth left, obviously.
Well, actually, oddly enough, so one of the guys on my Discord is doing like a dual boot with Windows for Dead Side 2, just to play Dead Side. And one of the funny things that he had, like he's using Windows 10, and on his computer, there was just this runaway process. I don't know if he's in chat, but it's Hamodi, and he has a runaway service on like Windows that was using up 100% of his disk, but reporting that it was only using 1 megabyte. And he was like, I don't know what to do. Like everything's completely borked. Like, have you tried turning it off and back on again? He's like, that's such a stupid recommendation. Does it? He had to do updates for like hours. And then it got like hung doing updates for hours. And then it updated, it was fine.
Updates on Windows are so bad. Like sometimes they really do take hours to download. Like, I don't know what mirrors they use, but it's really weird. All right, it doesn't matter. We're not going to talk about Windows anymore. If you're watching this afterwards, I apologize that you had to sit through all the discussion of Microsoft Windows. This is a Linux podcast. We just haven't started yet.
Yeah.
One of us knows that it's a Linux podcast. The other one, not so much.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm just like the Linux Foundation people using Macs.
So I made that video yesterday about how Kid Live sucks. First of all, I had about, I don't know, 20, maybe 30 people tell me that I was entitled because apparently because I'm not a developer, I don't have the right to complain about things, which is, I mean, right. then I wouldn't have a channel because I complain about everything. I mean, seriously, that's what I do. It's kind of the whole thing that I've cultivated here. Kind of an asshole. Well, it works.
My shtick.
Yeah. Hello. But also, I don't remember where I was going with that. That's going to happen a lot today. My brain is going to be going in one direction, then it's going to see something shiny over there, like, oh, cool.
Somebody's been working too much. That's what it is.
I need a vacation, but damn it, I took a day off on the channel, and my views have not recovered yet. It's so fucking stupid. YouTube does not like you to take days off. Now, when you've trained it to see new content every day, If you basically trained the algorithm that,
If you could get off, I will go ahead and say I'll do this publicly. I don't care. We're going on a trip down to Florida. If you can get off work and meet us down in Florida next Saturday, or meet up and I can pick you up and go down to Florida, that's fine. You're more than welcome, and we can do content at the beach, which will literally pertain nothing to Linux other than just two nerds talking on the beach. That's it. And
it's a very nice offer, but it's a little not enough notice there, Tyler.
I know. Yeah, like a week out is like kind of a lot. That's why when my mom told me about the trip, I'm like, you only like I think we had like a month's notice. I'm like, that's not a lot of time.
Are you guys flying?
No, we're driving down.
Yeah, I was gonna say they'll probably cancel your flight because they're canceling every flight now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started here. We've been bullshitting long enough. So, are you ready to go? Did you finally get Audacity installed?
Yes, sir. And you've tested and ready.
All right, cool. I'm gonna hit record in Audacity. I'm gonna hit record in OBS so that I have a backup for when your recording inevitably fails. You can do the claps whenever you like. Go ahead and do the claps, Tyler.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Seems reasonable enough.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're gonna go ahead and just jump right on in. No sense in procrastination. Save that for later. Okay. All right, let's go ahead. I think I'm ready to go. All right, hey everybody, welcome. I should start over again. False start. I need to put a little bit of space in between what I was saying before and the beginning, otherwise cutting it will be a pain in the ass. All right. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Linux Cast. I'm your host, Matt.
And I'm Tyler.
This is the Linux Cast. He is Tyler, and we are both using Linux right now. I'm a lying liar who lies. He's not using Linux.
Matt's just switched over to Windows 11. All right.
Every time.
I'm the one who's using Linux. Okay. Like
that is the biggest, fattest lie you've ever told. I would never do such a thing ever. Like I could show you my screen right now. I'm not using Windows. Thank God.
Boys, this is fake news. Don't listen to it. All right.
It's all right. Anyways, this is the Linux Cast. We talk about Linuxy things most of the time. We have never had a tangent in the history of the show, by the way. Never. And I promise that we won't have any tangents in this one either. So just to let you know that that's absolutely true and something's biting me in the back. Thank you very much for that. Random thing that happens. That doesn't happen ever. I should say it's like random things that's just they don't happen. I'm gonna keep getting. All right. Not prepared for this episode at all. So, those of you who've been watching or listening for a while, you'll say, "What else is new?" Yeah. All right. So, Tyler, what have you been doing in the world of FLOSS this week?
Well, I showed you earlier. Now the question is can I move my webcam around without disorientating everyone on the live stream? Because I can show off what I've done. Hopefully this will not be obtrusive to anybody. But my plan was to take my computer over there, my Roswell computer, and I've got an Intel board in it, and I took out my AMD mini ITX board and put my mini PC back together. And the plan was to have this mini build be an OpenBSD machine and have that one over there run Windows just so I could play games and stream them to this one using a service I found called Rainway. And it would have worked if my Intel board posted right, but it didn't. So I'll have to get either a new motherboard, which I need to upgrade the CPU anyway. It's an old one. So I'll have to do that eventually. But I ended up keeping a Windows partition and an OpenBSD partition. I've got two NVMe drives in here. So I've got one for when I want to play games. And well, technically I could have booted in my OpenBSD machine today, but I feel like synced up audio is probably nice. So I stayed here, but I've got an OpenBSD partition and this one, and I've been needing to update my OpenBSD dot files over on my GitLab and update my guide. It needs a small edit so that it's like actually right with my dot files.
Because you were using Calm Window Manager or something, right? You did those?
Yeah. And well, I'm not really sure that I don't think I have my DWM and ST dot files anymore, so I need to remove that section from my guide or redo my DWM and actually upload it up to my dot files. But probably in the next couple of days, like I'll have a full edit and everything, and my dot files will be much more up to date. So just in case anyone cares about or wants to check out my OpenBSD dot files, check them out, but just know they're not really super up to date. So like if you don't really know a lot about OpenBSD, don't assume that everything is perfect with the dot files. Everything that's there should work, but some of the stuff in my guides like won't be relevant, like building DWM and ST. I know that part is not relevant, and I think there's some other things like applications that I install that I no longer use. But that's pretty much what I've been working on. It's just getting all my computer stuff situated and dealing with the loss of my old Intel board that's been so reliable for years. But it's time to bury it. It's a sad day. What about you, man? You had a better time?
Yeah. So I have three things that I want to talk about in this section. And normally I try to limit myself to one and limit myself just to Linux stuff, but I have some things to talk about. So first I'll talk about the Linuxy thing that I want to talk about. I've been messing around with a window manager called DK. I made a video about it. It is really, really good, and it may become my daily driver. I'm not sure yet. I'm still kind of switching back and forth with that and i3. We'll see. I have it installed on hardware. I've been using it on that computer behind me, and it's really good. I mean, it has been around for a while, like 2 or 3 years, I think, at least. So it's not as new as I thought it was, but in comparison to like other window managers that have been around for like 20 years, it's still fairly, new, and it's astonishingly full featured. Like it just has so many features that you just expect to be there in a window manager that's been there for around a long time. Now, it's not the best documented ever, but it still has pretty good documentation. Like it has a good man page, all of the everything in the configuration file and the SXHKDRC file is well commented, so you know exactly what everything is going on. It's just not up to the level of like i3 or a Qtile or whatever in terms of documentation, but it's actually really good, and I highly recommend if you have a chance to give that a try on whatever you're on, Linux or BSPD or whatever it is. It's really good. The other thing that I want to talk about, other Linuxy thing that I want to talk about for a little while, and this is hard for me to say. I'm considering a switch away from Vim. And no, I'm not going to Emacs.
I knew that one.
When I say I'm switching away from Vim, it's not that I'm abandoning Vim. I'll still use Vim as my editor for like scripts and the show notes and all the stuff you normally do in the terminal. I'd still be doing that. But I don't know, like probably 4 or 5 months ago, I made the switch so I do all of my like for work paid writing and editing in Vim. And I've been doing that now full time for like 5 months in Vim. Matter of fact, I've only opened up LibreOffice like twice in the last like 5 months, and that was when I had to like edit a Word document, and I had to worry about the formatting and stuff. The problem I'm having with Vim, and I've been having this pretty much since the beginning, is that when I open up a document or a markdown file that is like over 50,000 words, and I get these things a lot, like I have to edit these things like once or twice a week. I get an article that takes like that long, and it's so slow. Like sometimes you hit the like J and K and it takes like fractions of a second, like half a second for it to actually move to the next line. And it's annoying. It really only happens in insert mode. Once you're in normal, or excuse me, it really only happens in normal mode. When you're in insert mode, it seems to work fine, which is why I've been able to continue to use it. So I just basically stay in insert mode the entire time and use the arrow keys to navigate. But it's just so slow. So I've been thinking about finding a different markdown editor that is more capable of handling word counts that high. Something like Obsidian or something like that along those lines. Those are more meant for writing of that kind. Now, like somebody, when I mentioned this in one of my videos, somebody said, well, you know, I code for a living and I have like 10, 15, 20,000 lines of code. Like, yes, that's true. Vim does not bog down when you have lots of lines of code. But the difference between lines of code and a history article is that these are actual like full paragraphs full of stuff. When you have 20,000 lines of code, you maybe have, you know, 10,000 words, you know, because those it's not a full paragraph, you know, so it's different. For whatever reason, Vim just does not handle that amount of words all that well. Now, it's possible that it's a plugin that I've had, but the problem is that I've disabled all the plugins that I don't need. Like if I disable if I disable Goyo and I disable the light house, Lightroom, light show, whatever the hell it's called, if I disable those two, there's no reason for me to use Vim because those are amazing things that I want to use. You know, I want to use that distraction-free thing. If I had to disable them, then I have, other than the Vim keys, there's no reason for me to use Vim other than being a nerd. You know, so no. I don't know. So that, anyways, that's the. I'm thinking about switching away from Vim for my writing, which is, you know, it's been a good experiment, but it's just, I don't know, it doesn't seem to be working all that well. It's a shame. The last thing I wanted to talk about is something I need to rant about for just a minute. So, and this has nothing to do with Linux, so I apologize to begin with. It really has nothing to do with computers, actually. It has something to do with mobile phones. And that is, I'm having this problem where when I'm at home, I get no service. And I've always had this problem with T-Mobile. I use Ting, which is, you know, they're an MVNO, and I have a T-Mobile SIM from them. And when I was on the iPhone, I didn't really notice the problem because I had Wi-Fi calling, and I just, you know, set up the Wi-Fi calling and it just worked fine. On the Android phone that I got, that doesn't have Wi-Fi calling through T-Mobile for some stupid reason. I contacted Ting. They said that T-Mobile had turned the feature off or something. I don't even know. So this morning I was like, you know, I've had enough of this going in and out of service. Like I can walk from here to the bathroom, which is like right next door. I can have service in the bathroom. I have no service when I'm sitting here. It's stupid. My mother wonders why I spend all my time in the bathroom. It's not because, you know, it's not for the usual reason. It's just because that's the only place I have service.
So funny.
Oh, that's good. I didn't even know it was going to go that direction, but it did. Anyways, I contacted Ting this morning. I was like, I'm just done with this, and they have another partner where they're an MVNO of, so they are partnered with Verizon as well. So I was like, what will it take for me to be able to get a Verizon SIM just to put in my phone? Because my phone is unlocked. It'll work with Verizon. Here's where the rant comes in. In order to switch to a Verizon SIM card on Ting, which is same company, so I'm going to just be moving from Ting to Ting, right? They just ship me a SIM card and I put it in my phone. That's the way it should work. But no, the way you have to do it is you have to open up a new Ting account with a new email address, and then you have to switch away from Ting to some other carrier, and then port your number back to Ting in order to switch to that new SIM card. I swear to God, that's actually what the guy told me you had to do. And I was like, okay, why would I come back? Like, why would you come back? Like, yeah. Like if I have to go through, I mean, porting a number is a pain in the ass. And you want me to do it 3 times or twice, whatever it is? I mean, it was so stupid. Like What?
Why would what how does
I
that
don't
make
know.
any sense?
I would have understood. Like, it would still been stupid, but I would have understood if I had to port it from one Ting account to the other Ting account. That would have made sense to me. Like one from one Ting to the other Ting. That would have made sense, right?
Yeah.
Still pretty stupid that you can't just say, hey, douchebag has a new SIM card, switch to the service over to that. You know, that would have made sense to me. But you know, one from one Ting to the other Ting would have made sense. But the fact that you have to go from one Ting to another carrier back to Ting, the new Ting account, it's just, I mean, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
That's genuinely like, so that's like you go to a car dealership and like you have like you've like it's like you go to a Chevy dealership. You already have a Chevy and you're like, I would like to get a different one. And they're like, well, for you to get that one and for you to trade in yours, you're going to need to go to a Dodge or some other place.
A different dealer. Buy a Ford. Trade that fucker in back on your Chevy. It's just, it was so dumb. Like I spent a half an hour in their chat this morning I tried to understand, like, why is this the case? And the guy didn't know. It's just that's the way they'd been doing it forever.
That's just like, can I speak to like a chief member of the company and can we just talk for like 5 minutes about how dumb this is? Like, what? Like, why would you make somebody go to one of your competitors to get a different plan?
I can't answer the question. Also, I can hear myself in the background there, Tyler, again. Excellent news. It's like I can hear myself twice. It's fantastic. It's so good.
If you want me to, I will get up and go grab my headset. It's right over there in the closet.
I will try to just use the OBS thing. It won't be quite as good quality, but it'll be all right.
Syd A.
Yeah. Next time, just use your headphones. Be a normal person. Use Linux. I'm just.
Well,
just use Linux. How's this hard?
You know what? I might just end up doing that just for the shits and giggles. I might just.
It's gonna be hilarious because this is the way it's gonna work. Monday through Thursday and Saturday and Sunday, Tyler's going to be a Windows user, but in the morning on Friday, he's going to wipe his Windows install a random Linux distro just so he can use Linux on the podcast and then switch back to Windows. So.
I have an extra drive, so instead of just rocking OpenBSD, I'll definitely still be switching constantly, but I'll put Linux on that and just use it. Like, the sad part is like, you're completely right. Most of the week I will be running Windows because I am heavily addicted to Deadside. I have quickly went from like 100 hours in the game to like 160, 175, something like that. I've been spending too much of my days and nights in Deadside. Like, I've been living in that game.
You could if you had to deal with Ting in order to switch between operating systems, you'd have to go from Windows to BSD back to Windows in order to switch to Windows.
It was that complicated to switch. I can almost guarantee you I'd stop. Like, that's how I could probably stop myself from distro hopping, is make it to where I have to contact somebody to get like a verification code before I can like switch, and they make it a hassle. Like, I get transferred like 7 times.
You weren't alive yet when, in order to use Windows, you had to activate it through the phone. Like, there was no internet, right? Like Windows 95, yes, it had internet, but there was no activation servers at the time. So in order to, when you went to install it, you'd have to activate it, like, literally by calling someone. It wasn't really until XP where they had the servers where you could contact the internet, do it through the internet. Can you imagine if that was still the case? Like, every time you installed Windows, you had to get online, or you had to open up your phone, dial a 1-800 number, and then try, because the way they had it set up was that you had to read out like a 16 or 18 or 24 digit number with letters and stuff like that to a robot. And you gotta remember, this was like 1995. So robots weren't really they weren't really good at listening to you. So you could try it would force you to try 3 times, and they'd never got it right for 3 times. Then you'd have to wait for them to transfer you to someone so you could read them the same number, and then your Windows would be activated.
You know, I'm just trying to imagine someone with like a thick Midwestern accent or something like that, just trying to read off numbers and just getting so pissed off. I got the machine like, no, I didn't say A. Like, I didn't say. Oh God, that's too much of a hassle, man. Like, no. We do have a lot of convenience nowadays that's overlooked.
Now, these days, we just use Linux.
Yeah. Fixes a lot of issues, unless you want to play an easy anti-cheat game where they could just press a single button and make it work on Linux. But they don't, which aggravates the shit out of me. It's one button. Just devs, press it. Why? Come on.
Oh yeah, Shadow, I know that you still if you want to activate Windows, there is an option to call them, and if you are trying, if you do, okay, so this has become the Windows cast, but I just want to talk about this for a minute. Even as recent as the last time I used Windows, I refuse to buy more than one like product key. Like, I would never buy more than one. So I used the same Windows 7 product key for, I don't know, 15 years. It actually may have been a Windows XP product key because they let you upgrade, right?
Yep.
And I use it on all my computers. Like, you're only supposed to use it on one. But the thing is that it recognized if you tried to activate it online through their servers, it would recognize that you're trying to activate it on more than one computer. So it would say, hey, you already have using this on one computer, but if this is not true, give us a call. So if you called them, read out that stupid long ass number, it would still tell you, you are trying to use this on more than one computer. But if you contacted, it would then say, if this is an error, press 0 and you can speak to somebody. If you lied to them and say, hey, I'm just reinstalling it on the same computer, they'd go ahead and activate your version of Windows. Even if you weren't actually installing it on the same version or the same computer. Like, I did that over and over again. First of all, it was stupid, but I did that over and over every time I reinstalled Windows, whether it was on this computer or on a laptop, all for all my family. That's the way I did it. I just refused to buy more than one key. So yeah, I was very aware that you can still do that.
I'm not pro lying, but I'm not really against that. Like, I don't have a moral objection to installing Windows on more computer.
Like, I'm not paying $110 for your license. Like, this was before this was before you could easily get like a manufacturer's version of Windows where it's like 10 or 15 bucks. It was back when you actually had to go like to Best Buy and buy a actual physical CD with like a Windows key in it. Like, it was $110. Like, I'm not doing that to put that on my grandmother's computer or, that's not going to happen. Like, it's not worth paying that amount of money. Like, it feels bad. Like, a family member, you're not worth paying $110, but not when you can deal with 10 minutes worth of hassle and get it for free. Like, so anyways, why are you people still watching this? This is supposed to be a Linux podcast. I promise we're going to talk about Linux here very soon. So let's move into the contact information. If you want to get in contact with us, you can do so any number of ways. You can subscribe to all of our feeds and stuff like that at the linuxcast.org. All of our links and stuff like that will be right there. You'll be able to find the latest episodes, which is not true because I haven't updated it in a long time, but you can find some of our episodes anyways. Some recent blog posts, again, those haven't been updated in a long time, but eventually I'll get a system where I can actually update that stuff. Anyways, you can email us at email at the Linux, or I think it's email at the linuxcast.org is the email address. I don't actually have that written here for some reason. I don't know why. You can follow Tyler, who goes by Zany Online, at youtube.com/ZanyOG. He's encroaching 3,000 subscribers. Close?
Yeah. It's kind of wild.
Nuts. It's nuts. Like, this guy's famous. It's insane. It's good. Anyways, you should definitely go subscribe to him if you enjoy game development and random, like, Linuxy stuff every once in a while, OpenBSD. He's literally like, I'm surprised he hasn't done videos on like wildlife exploration or something at this point, because the guy's all over the place. I tell you, he could not have chosen a better username than Zany if he had tried. Like,
I have videos on me building a wagon, so you know.
It's true. He does. So anyways, go subscribe to him. You can subscribe to the Linuxcast at youtube.com/linuxcast. All of our contact information, including our links to Twitter, Mastodon, all that stuff, will be at thelinuxcast.org/contact. So also links to the store are on that website as well, so check out the store. Okay, so that is the contact information. We're going to move on now to the news. Now, before we move on to the news, I'm just going to make a change to the podcast that Tyler has nothing he knows nothing about. We're making a change to the podcast. So starting next week, we're going to be stripping out the news for 1 week, and we're going to be doing a listener feedback during this period of the show. So we'll be doing that every other week. So next week will be listener feedback. The week after that, we'll go back to news. Then we'll do listener feedback and so on and so forth. So if you have, when I say listener feedback, I mean like questions, comments on the things that we're talking about, whatever it could be. You can get those things to us any number of ways. You can email me. You can leave a comment on this video here, or you can tweet at me, I guess, is be a good way to do that. Email is probably the best way to do that. So email at thelinuxcast.org if you have things that you want to say. So that'll be next week in place of the news. So Tyler, every week you and I, well, not every week previous to this, not anymore. They're just going to have to deal with our news being slightly delayed from now on. So we'll have to be doing it every other week. But usually we have the most latest breaking news here on the podcast. I should have like a sound effect or something, like the CNN breaking news thing. Definitely should have that. So you have a news item thing for us. So what is your news item thing for us this week?
This article about GNOME Web is now like one of the best browsers on Linux because it has extensions now.
Okay.
It's awesome. I mean, like, I don't really know what to think about this article at all, because it's very much praising GNOME Web, and essentially it all boils down to, like, now that it has extensions, it's one of the best browsers on Linux. And I wanted to bring this up because I don't know that that's true. Like,
what?
Yeah, like this is a difficult one because you're like, well, I mean, like, look, extensions being added is a great thing, but I've never used GNOME Web and been like, all this needs is extensions, and it's great.
What web engine does it use? Like, does it use Gecko, or is it a front end for Chromium, or is it like Qt Web Engine or something?
It's either Qt Web Engine or crap. You said the first one that you said, the Firefox Gecko. Yeah, it's I believe it's one of those two. I don't know. I think it's a Gecko.
Well, it has Firefox sign-in, so I'm assuming that it's Gecko then.
Yeah.
So, okay. Let me just posit this question. If that's true, and neither one of us are experts, so we don't really know. We're just guessing out of our ass as usual. If that's true though, why would you use this and not just use Firefox? Unless you're so attached to the way GNOME designs software. Like, if you really want a GTK browser, that'd have to be like the only reason why, right?
Well, I mean, like, I think the only two options are either you really like GTK applications, or you're using GNOME. Like, that would probably be the only two.
Well, see, the thing is that the Linux experiment, he did a browser thing where he was trying to find a new browser for himself, and he used GNOME Web for like a month or something like that, and he had so many problems with websites rendering, because of course you did, that he couldn't use it. It was unusable. Adding extensions doesn't fix that. Okay.
Yeah.
No. See, the thing.
I think it needed extensions, but I don't think extensions solve a lot. Like, when I've used it, like, my main thing with GNOME Web is like YouTube is either like doesn't load properly, or loads properly but just slow as shit. So, like, I don't think an extension. Like, I don't think I could get an extension to be like, oh yeah, YouTube's fast now.
Yeah. See, the thing is that if this, I think we might be a little bit hypocritical here. Mainly because if this was Qt browser saying it had extensions now, we'd both be jumping down, up and down in this in the streets. You know, if we could get real ad blocking in Qt browser, I'm never using Firefox again. You know?
Yeah. Well, I've heard that some people have gotten, like, I don't think it's uBlock, but they've gotten some extra way of doing like ad block in Qt browser.
I think they call it Grease Monkey or something like that.
Well, Grease Monkey I know is like, I think Grease Monkey is their like extension like method. Like, you use Grease Monkey.
I don't know. All I know is that every time I say, oh, Qt browser doesn't have ads, somebody points me at Grease Monkey, but there's no, as far as I know, there's no good like documentation on how to run it. But the thing is like last year or 2 years ago, whatever, they implemented Brave's ad blocking in Qt browser, and like that sounds good on paper, but it still doesn't block all the ads. It doesn't do a good job. So if Qt browser had extensions, if that's what this story was, we'd be much happier, and we wouldn't be making as much fun of. But then I made the same comment about Conquer. Like, do people like do people still like actually use Epiphany and GNOME Web? Like, is there actually like somebody out there that says, yeah, this is my daily driver, I don't have any other browsers?
Yes, because if there's a lot of people out there that are using the I can't remember what it's called, the LibreWolf or whatever browser, like, and they rave about it, trust me, there are definitely people that use GNOME Web, because LibreWolf can't render like fucking 80% of the web, and there's people out there that are like swear by it, love it, and like major websites that like I've had to use for work or like clients and stuff like just don't run at all. Like they literally, like, it blocks so much JavaScript that like I think it blocks all JavaScript. So there's a lot of websites that just won't load. And if people are using that, then there's definitely people that are like, GNOME Web is fine for me, which is not like, that's a problem. It's great.
No, you can use whatever you want. I'm just, it's like, it'd be like being Amish. I mean, that's really offensive, I'm sure, but the thing about Amish is you can make fun of them on the internet all they want. They're never going to know. It's really, really horrible. And I don't mean beautiful people. They're just, I made this joke on Twitter the other day. Like, you're driving along, you pass an Amish guy with his horse and buggy, and he's passing a gas station, just laughing his ass off because he doesn't need it, you know. But anyway, it's completely off the point. Using GNOME Web would feel like you're living in the Amazon jungle. You know what I mean? It's just, or, you know, living in the boondocks off the grid. You're Theodore Kaczynski or something. You're the Unabomber. You know, it's like, yeah, technically you can browse the web, but it's not a great experience, so you probably don't do it all that often. You know what I mean? It's like if you wanted to put as much pain in the way of like cat videos as much as possible. Like, you don't want to watch cat videos anymore, so you use the worst possible browser ever.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that don't need a lot. Like, they don't really like going to heavy sites, and they tend to avoid them. And for stuff like that, like, I think the more simplistic browsers are fine. Like, they're just fine. Like, you wouldn't notice a problem, but you can't recommend that for most people. Like, most people are going to need a fully featured browser, which is, I think we all agree that that's not really the future that we want. Like, we don't want our browsers becoming a secondary OS.
We don't want it to become Vivaldi, is what you're saying.
Yes. I mean, Vivaldi is atrocious, man. Like, it's just, it's atrocious.
I made this tweet the other day, about a month ago, actually. It's like Vivaldi is the Emacs of web browsers. Because it has everything, man. It's just, you have a web browser. It's a base thing that's meant for browsing the web, but you've built so much stuff on top of it.
But you would have to give it also the spin of it also pulls like a lot from open source, and it's just like don't steal our shit. Like our 5% of our browser that like we made, don't touch it. Like that's ours. Like it's special.
At this point, I was like, there was a point where both you and I were big proponents of Microsoft Edge, so we don't have a lot of room to talk in terms of proprietary browsers. So that's just, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Before we move on to my news, I just want to take a moment to apologize to anyone who's related to an Amish person, because I know that, I'm going to get an email saying, "Well, that was really offensive. You shouldn't have said that." I know. I apologize. Don't cancel me.
I don't think that was something that you need to apologize to.
I don't think so either, but I'm covering my bases.
I love like the Amish men too. Like my favorite thing in the world. Like there's an Amish community not too far from here, and they sell like a whole bunch of bread and stuff.
Oh, they make the greatest shit, man. Like I don't know what they put. They're definitely putting wheat or something in their food because it's really good.
It's so good.
like we had some Amish potatoes. Like they had always had a stand of before Walmart's were like everywhere. On the same corner you could go to, now you can see Walmart, but before there used to be like one Walmart. It was like 30 or 40 miles away from us, but we wanted to shop there because it was like really cheap. It's got to remember this is the 90s, but somewhere along the way there was an Amish community, and along the road they'd have their little stand, right? And they had some of the greatest food, just so good. Now I'm
just in case anyone is not like really used to the US or like rural parts of the US, and you ever start traveling out to rural areas, if you ever get to a place that's pretty rural, ask if there's an Amish community nearby, and then go get food there, because it will be amazing. Particularly if you can get preserves from like an Amish community. Almost every Amish community that I've ever bought like stuff like preserves or bread at, it is incredible. It is like, treat yourself. It is so good. And you also kind of get to meet like they live completely different. Like it's an interesting way of life. Mm-hmm. Like it just is. And they're very different, and they're always really accepting and nice. So if you ever are traveling, check it out.
Remember at the beginning when I said no tangents, right? That didn't last long. Okay, moving on to my news of the week. Mine is going to kind of play into the main topic a little bit. So my topic was, or my news this week was a Fedora 37. They proposed for Fedora 37 to allow unrestricted access to FlatHub. So if you've used Fedora in the past from 36 behind, ever since Flatpak became a thing, you'll know that the actual use of Flatpak was very handicapped in that it didn't have access to like the repository. Like FlatHub is where everything is when it comes to Flatpak, and by default Fedora did not have this added to their system, and they had no way to do it outside of the terminal or the software center. You had to do this through using either a Flatpak itself, so you could go to FlatHub, hit a button, and it would install into your software center, or you could use a command line, a script or whatever. So it's interesting, and the reason why that's the case is because FlatHub contains software that is proprietary. So it had like Google Chrome is there, it has like DaVinci Resolve on there. There's a ton of software on it that is licensed under something that is incompatible with the ethos of Fedora. That's the reason why you can't get NVIDIA drivers out of the box on Fedora. You have to enable a repo in order to get them. They don't do anything that is proprietary, except for the kernel blobs, obviously. The point is that they're thinking about allowing FlatHub to be enabled by default in Fedora 37, which I think is huge news, and also great news, because I'm always going to be an AUR guy, but Flatpak is quickly becoming the secondary package management system on all of my computers. Like when there's something that I either can't get from the AUR, or I'm just I'm more interested in it being like 100% stable, and I'm not interested in constant updates. I install the Flatpak version of it, and I think that Fedora finally embracing FlatHub sees Flatpak becoming more of like a first-class citizen, not only on Fedora but everywhere else too, because it's really good. And I think the reason why they're doing this is something we're going to talk about later, is that they're more and more focusing on the development of Silverblue and Kino White. And if you want to have access to a lot of software, you'd have to enable FlatHub. Having it out of the box means that both of those containerized immutable systems have access to way more software out of the box.
Yeah. And I also don't see this being like, I don't really think that you can construe this as being a bad thing. Like, it's not like having easy access to proprietary stuff is a bad thing. Like, I don't, for the people that want proprietary stuff from FlatHub, you're only making it easier to get it for the people that want it, for your users that want it, and then for the people that don't want it, you don't have to get it.
Yeah, you don't have to install it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like that, like FlatHub or the Software Center is deceptive about the licensing on something. They make it pretty clear. Like, they have a section for it. Like, they show you what it's licensed under. So I don't think this is a problem. And if you're against this, I don't understand why. This is only making things easier for people and more convenient. And if you're against the proprietary aspect of some of the things that you can get on FlatHub, then you don't have to install them. They're not being shoved on you. But now you'll be able to see them, which I don't think that's really annoying. Like, come on, not that big, not that big of a deal.
Well, I mean, I've never understood this idea that if you hide away the proprietary software, you can just kind of pretend it doesn't exist. It's like eating a whole pan of brownies in the bathroom, and then saying the calories don't count. It's not, not really the way that kind of stuff works. You know what I mean? So just because
it's there, and it's one of these, like, it's the same argument we had when we were trying out Elementary OS. And like, we talked a lot about this, about it being a new user focused distro that when they switched over, I think it was like either 6 or 6.1. I can't remember which one we were trying out at the time. But when they switched over, they were relying only on Flatpaks. And because most of their native applications were not Flatpaks, and they weren't pulling from FlatHub, their Software Center was like a barren wasteland.
It was, and they weren't even doing it because of the Libre thing. They were doing it because they wanted only FlatHub or Flatpaks that conform to their design standards. You know, they only wanted ones that looked like they were designed for Elementary OS. Which, what are you doing? When they announced that they were going to switch to Flatpak only, like, I was like, that's a good idea, because you're going to have access to all of this software. It's going to be amazing. Like, but no, that's not how it worked. Like, you can even install Firefox. Like, the only thing you had was Epiphany. It was the only thing that was there, and you couldn't install Firefox without enabling FlatHub. And this is a new user distro. You know what I mean? This is for people who aren't going to know how to install FlatHub out of the box. You know, it was just, I was like,
and Elementary's OS design scheme caters more towards Mac OS users. And could you imagine someone who has never tried Linux, has maybe watched 1 or 2 Linux videos in their life before, and they install Elementary OS, successfully boot into it, they're all excited, and then they go into the Software Center expecting to see something like the App Store on Mac OS, and then see that. Like, I mean, we both checked that out. There was like maybe 50 applications in there, maybe. It was a wasteland of applications. Like, what are users can't do anything, and expecting someone to know how to, for one, add more flat packs is wild. Like,
Yeah.
you expect them to know to go to FlatHub, go to the quick start section, click on the distro, then copy the command line at, like thing and run it. Like, I would understand that if there was a pop-up that explained exactly a step-by-step process to do it, but that didn't exist. So it's just, it didn't make any sense. And also, why would you not? Like, there's no, I get the design scheme thing, but that's a pretty loose argument.
Well, that elementary always has been about as much control over their operating system as possible. And when you enable a third-party repository, you have no control. But, like, then why did you switch to the Flatpak? Why didn't you just come up with your own random, package formatting system if you want that much control? I mean, nobody would hardly ever use it, and you would just make it much harder for developers to make their software available across, all of Linux. But then you'd have your tight-fisted control, because that's the thing about elementary S that has always bothered me, is like they've tried as much as possible to make this thing as Apple-like as possible. The entire ecosystem, from the design language to not having like a minimize button on their Windows, to all of this stuff, like they've tried their hardest to be as much like Apple as possible. And the thing is that by tightening down their desktop environment and their package management strategy so much, they've made it less good. The thing about Apple is, like, you can say all you want about Mac OS, but that thing is full featured. Like, that thing has all the features that you probably want. It does things in weird ways. It definitely is closed down. But if you want to install an application from the web, you can do so, and it's going to pop up all these warnings that are going to tell you that you're going to die if you do this, and you should download everything from the Mac App Store. But you can do it. Like, it's full featured.
Yeah.
The problem
just to expand on what you're saying, you mean software-wise, it's full feature.
Yeah, software-wise. Yep. Like it has all the things that you need to use, and while it has restrictions, you can use it as an operating system, right? With elementary OS, they took that ethos and just kind of made it so constricted, because and they kind of had to, because it's a really, really small team, right? They couldn't focus on making such a, it's the reason why it took them so long to get that 6.0 version out, and why even when it came out it felt incomplete, because it's a really small team. But the thing is that when you are a small team, the greatest thing about open source software and Linux in general is that other people are there. Like, this is a humongous community that does a whole bunch of stuff. We duplicate effort all over the place. There is no reason to be so tight-fisted on your idea for what you want with a distro to shoot yourself in the foot, basically, by saying, hey, we got to do it this way, and not have, like, FlatHub is there. It's there. Use the damn thing.
I think this is something that trips up a lot of distributions. And to bring it back to Fedora, I think Fedora doing this is a fantastic decision, as long as they go through with it, with making FlatHub just there by default. A lot of distributions have either a handful of goals or a singular goal in mind, and they not lose focus, but can sometimes forget that what makes the powerhouse operating systems that most people use is software. Like, if you forget that having the software that people need is an important thing, then you can't complain when your user base shrinks or is just extremely niche and very small. Because for most people, what is a make or break is, do you have X application that I need? Right. And if you're artificially limiting yourself software-wise, it's not a great thing for new user, like not, I almost said retention, but like bringing in new users. Mm-hmm. It's not a great thing. People need, especially when you're focused, or at least potentially focused, on new users, the ease of that getting that new software is the most important part.
Yeah.
If your process of getting applications or software is a little bit more in depth, like let's say like with the AUR, like, you know, you're not just going to like install an Arch distro, and then if it doesn't already come with an AUR helper in there, it's not an immediate knowledge thing for a new user, right, of knowing how to install an AUR application or anything. But with Arch, their documentation is so good that once you find out that a certain application is on the AUR and you're like, how in the hell do I install something from the AUR? There's tons of guides on it, step-by-step guides to do it. And if your distro is not like that, like Arch, where it's more aimed towards advanced users, or really advanced users just means somebody who's used it a lot and who probably has experienced that problem and then figured out how to solve it. If your distro is not focused for that, it's focused on new users, getting that software and making that process as simple as possible is the most important thing. Right. That's how you get new users. And I think for right now, like, retaining Linux users is not hard. Linux has gotten so good nowadays, bringing in new, or like not bringing in, keeping Linux users and not having them have to go off to use Windows for some reason, like Zoom or something for business. It's gotten to the point now where that's really not a problem. The thing now is how can we make Linux easier for everyone to use, and everyone to get in on, and
attractive for new users? And that's where Elementary went wrong, is because the thing that Elementary OS has always had for it is that they had a very vocal community of people who used it and recommended it to new people. And when they took 2.5 years to go from version 5 to version 6, they lost a lot of that word of mouth, because a lot of the people who were big proponents of it moved to other places. Like, they moved to other distros because they needed things that were updated. They needed a newer kernel. They bought new hardware, and they needed a kernel that would actually run their new graphics card or whatever. So they moved to different. They moved to Ubuntu because it has a newer kernel or whatever. So they shot themselves in the foot by taking so long to update. And then when it finally did come out, it was worse. It had some cool features, like the dark mode in Elementary OS, gorgeous. Like, it really looked really nice. Accent colors, fantastic. But then you can download Firefox. Like you can download it. Like, it doesn't have to be Fire. Like, I just say Firefox because that's the open source browser that everybody uses on Linux. That if you're going to use the open source browser, that's the one you're going to use. Never mind what most people would want to install, like, would be Chrome. Like, you couldn't install Chrome easily because you can't install a deb package out of the box on Elementary.
I think the biggest thing with that release of Elementary OS, which, I mean, we're talking a lot like negatively about Elementary OS. It's not like it's a terrible distro.
Which wasn't even the freaking topic, by the way. Just
exactly, completely moved off. But all I will say is, I think what really hurt them in that way, that release would brought back people who already used Elementary OS and moved away from it because it was just older kernel, or it had just gotten not as easier to use. It probably brought them back in, and they enjoyed a lot of the newer features and were fine with just getting FlatHub or whatever. But I think for everybody, like, when that release came out, it's been so long that people were very vocal about it, and there was a lot of hubbub about the new release of Elementary OS. And for a lot of the people who are new and are like, oh, a lot of people are talking about Elementary OS, I guess I'll give this a shot. They shot themselves in the foot big time on that release, because there are definitely plenty of new users that tried it out and then were like, no, and left, and we'll never give it another shot.
Just along those lines, and so we need to move on. But I don't know if you know who Paul Thurrott is. He's a big Windows blogger, right? He has been a Windows blogger for like 30 years. All he covers is Windows, so it doesn't matter if you don't know him. But that's the point. He only covers Windows. He has a blog about Windows, and he blogged about the Elementary OS 6 release. Like, that's how out there this release was, because everyone, even like some people who were just kind of follow Linux, in the periphery, they paid attention to that release, and that's how bad it was. Like you got on there, like everybody knew this. They had an inflow of new people, and they realized once they got there, it was not good. You know, and that's. I mean, one of the things we didn't talk about was the whole fallout of Elementary, because like the co-founders like got in a big, you know, brouhaha, and one of them left, or one of them decided that they're going to leave, and then they had to kind of fight over who owned the company. Who knows if there's going to be a version 7 at this point? Who knows? Anyways, we were talking about FlatHub and Flatpak, and the reason why I said that would lead well into the main topic is because our main topic this week is containerization. And when I say containerization, I mean snaps, Flatpaks, those things, but also immutable file systems where basically they've containerized the entire Linux stack. Like the only thing that you have access to is the home directory. That's where you're going to live. You can make no changes to the, you know, the underlying root file system. So I wanted to talk about that. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because I've been using Kinoite now for almost 2 months, off and on. Most of my time has still been spent in Arch, just because, you know, I have work to do, and that's where all my stuff is, and it's just easier that way. Also been having problems with KDE, but that's kind of beside the point. So I've been using Kinoite, and Kinoite is the KDE version of Silverblue, which is the immutable file system for Fedora. Just a brief talk about how that's going. It is good, but also amazingly restrictive. Like, there are some things that you just, if you're a Linux nerd, you're kind of used to being able to do, like add an X-sessions file. You know, can't do that in Silverblue, not easily anyways. Or compile DWM in like the /opt file directory, which is something some people do. Can't do that on Kinoite or Silverblue. At least, again, not easily. And that's kind of the point, is like the idea behind the future of Linux is that when you download a distribution, you have access to your home directory and you can do whatever you want. You can install whatever programs you want, usually from a containerized package manager like Flatpak or Snaps, probably Flatpaks at this point. And that's how you get all of your applications. But you can, if you want, download things from like a terminal terminal package manager like RPM Austria, I believe is what it's called, and you can do that if you want to, and that will then force you to actually reboot your computer in order for that application to be installed, because you've made alterations to the file structure that you don't actually have permissions to do until you reboot your system. But the future of Linux is that underlying root file system is the same on every person's distribution or every person's computer. So it's exactly the same. That way, when they do an update to that system, it's easy enough for them to do it without having to worry about different changes, without any of the user facing changes having conflicts with things that are going to be in the update. Better Delta style updates, so that you can just kind of put in the bits and pieces instead of having the whole kit and caboodle downloaded. You know, so the future of Linux is supposedly this, and I've been using it now for 2 months, and it makes me sad for Linux. So Tyler, before I talk about why it makes me sad, what do you think about the future of Linux in this way?
I to be honest, immutable file systems I don't think are the future of desktop Linux at all. I think they're more relevant to like enterprise like environments, where like essentially like call center environments, stuff like that, where you have hundreds, if not thousands of people all working at computers doing seeming like pretty menial tasks, like, you know, like not very intensive, like system wise demanding tasks. Like they just need to be able to take phone calls, log notes, do all that type of stuff. I think in enterprise environments, immutable file systems make sense for that, because you can't have, you know, an employee just do something stupid and like brick the system or whatever. They're limited to like their shit, like where they should be on the system, and they can't really damage anything. I think it makes sense for that kind of environment. And then having a lot of your applications be containers makes sense too, because that also means that I mean, it takes care of a lot of security issues, or it doesn't really take care of them, but at the very least, potentially mitigates a lot of security issues. So I think that is good. On the desktop, though, I don't think immutable file systems make much sense. They, especially if you know what you're doing and you like to customize stuff on your system, like, yeah, that's not it's not fun. It's not a good solution. I really just think containers, for when it pertains to the future of the desktop Linux space, I think containerization is only a good solution for mass distributing like big applications. Like, your small like window managers and stuff like that. I don't think it's ever going to be popular that those are distributed in like Flatpaks or snaps or anything like that. But for applications like Discord, bigger applications like Steam, Blender, OBS, stuff like this, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to start using containers for that, just because it makes it easier to distribute stuff, and it's easier on, I wouldn't say new users, but just casual users. It's easier to, especially on something like Fedora, even adding, after you've added FlatHub, or let's just say they make it to where it's just immediately there, getting a Flatpak is not hard at all. Like, it's super easy for everybody. I think for those types of bigger applications, it makes sense, and it'll probably move to, most big applications I feel like will probably move towards distributing mainly in containers. They'll probably still have the option to get it from source, and assuming it's open source, obviously they'll still have that option there. But like when you go to their website, the download link will reference a Flatpak or a Snap or whatever. I think that's probably like the way that we're moving, and I don't think it's a bad thing. For bigger applications, it's fine. If you don't want it in a container, it's open source. You don't have to get it in a container. It's fine.
Yeah.
But it just makes it easier on developers and ensuring that they're able to get it out to users in an easy way. I think that's good.
Well, and
immutable file systems, though, I don't think they're going to take off. I don't think they're great for the desktop.
Yeah. See, okay. So a couple things about things you said. So containerized applications make a ton of sense, because one of the, for example, it's not a great example, but just bear with me for a second. If you've ever downloaded Pandoc, I use Pandoc every single day, and basically what Pandoc does is it allows you to convert file formats from one to another. So for example, let's say you had an HTML file, you wanted to translate it to, or convert it to Markdown. You can do that with Pandoc. But Pandoc is written in Haskell. And if you know anything about Haskell, you'll know that it has a ton of libraries, like a literal ton. It's the same thing if you download an application that's written in Python. Python has a ton of libraries. You download those things, whatever. And it doesn't really matter, if it's a GUI or a terminal thing. You're going to have to deal with libraries. And the thing about containerized applications that makes it so appealing to developers is that they can package the libraries and everything that their application needs right inside the container, and they don't have to worry about version numbers or any of that stuff. So you can just get that thing. It's always going to work forever and ever. That's the reason why containerized applications make a ton of sense, right? It's the reason why, they've become so popular. It's a really good idea. Now, we've had some problems with the idea in terms of actually implementing it. So in traditional Linux fashion, we couldn't agree on a format, so we've created a couple. That's the way we've done it. And Flatpak now seems to have been the format that most distributions seems to have kind of settled on. There are a few that still use snaps, and snaps, I think the reason why that hasn't caught on more in outside of Ubuntu is because of the it snaps, and they're not very good. So containerized applications make a ton of sense. But the immutable file system, you said you don't think it's going to catch on, and I'm going to have to disagree with you, unfortunately. And I'm saying it unfortunately for a good thing. And that's the reason why I say that is because the Steam Deck, it has an immutable file system, and as more and more people are introduced to Linux through that type of thing, we're going to see that more and more. It's almost guaranteed. And I've been listening to people who are much more smart about this than I am. Like there's a podcast called 2.5 Admins. Those guys know a lot of stuff. Another one of the late night Linux versions has Martin Wimpress on it, and they were talking about this. And all those guys are pretty much convinced that this is going to be the future of Linux. If you want to download a distro, you're going to be downloading something that has an immutable file system. And I can understand that thing. Like let's just take the Steam Deck. That I don't know why that word was hard. Let's just take that as an example. The reason why it's a good thing, right? When you have a product that you're selling to people who have no idea what the hell they're doing, they don't care that this thing is Linux. They're just buying it to play games on. You don't want them to have access to the file system. It'd be like giving people access to the file system on a PlayStation or an Xbox. You know what I mean? It would probably break the PlayStation or the Xbox if they didn't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? That's the reason why an immutable file system in that situation is actually a really good idea, because you're dealing with people who don't know anything about Arch Linux. I mean, seriously, that thing's Arch Linux, and you're giving it to people who have no clue how to spell Linux, let alone use it. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know. I think the problem with this example, though, is because we're talking about a game console. I mean, that's really what the Steam Deck is. At its core, it's just a handheld console.
People are going to see the success of that in people being able to use that and say, hey, this is a way to get more new users. I mean, I don't think they're actually I don't think that's true at all. I don't think that they're going to see that and say that's how you're going to get new users to use Linux. Instead, I think that they're going to see a way to make development of Linux easier across Linux distributions. So it doesn't really matter what distribution you're using. If you have this set up, it's easier for the development cycle to continue on in a steady pace, because you're not worrying about different versions of the kernel. You're not worrying about different versions of the file system. It's all exactly the same, and that's how you deal with updating it. You don't have to worry about there being 12 different versions of Ubuntu out there. They all use exactly the same one. You know what I mean? Every single one uses exactly the same one.
Like that doesn't really pertain to the immutable file system, though, because every distro is going to have different kernel versions, regardless of an immutable file system.
Not if they use an immutable. For example, let's just say Ubuntu went immutable tomorrow. Every single flavor would then be using the exact same file system across the board. The only thing that would be different would be the layer on top of it. That'd be it. Obviously, it'd be more complicated than that, so don't at me and tell me how I'm drastically oversimplifying. I don't care. That would be the point, is that they would be able to significantly lower the development time over having to create an ISO for every single version of Ubuntu. Let's just ignore the flavors. Ubuntu itself has 4 or 5 different things that they have to put out. They have like Ubuntu Core, they have Ubuntu Server, they have the Ubuntu Desktop, they have a whole bunch of different Ubuntu stuff, ISOs that they have to take care of. And that's just this version. They also have to take care of every single version since like 1404 is still being updated, So if they had an immutable file system where they knew that underlying operating system was exactly the same on every single computer, so they didn't have to worry about different, hardware blobs in the kernel and stuff like that, all this stuff that developers have to deal with, it's all exactly the same. It makes it easier for them to develop. Now, obviously, not a developer, so I'm sure I got some of that wrong.
Well, but see, the immutable file system has nothing to do with that, because different distros are still going to have different layout. Like,
what does Ubuntu care about what Arch Linux is doing? This is not about how. But
Ubuntu is not the software developers. They're just the distro. Software developers, I don't think many software developers have an issue with the layout of a distro or that really causing problems.
No, it has nothing to do with the layout. It's the root file system. It has nothing to do with any of the other stuff. That's the reason why Kino White and Silverblue are basically the same underlying system. You can update them both at the exact same time. It pulls from the same source of code, even though one uses KDE, one uses GNOME. You know, the kitty and the GNOME part doesn't matter whatsoever because it's living in an abstraction layer above the root file system. You know, that root file system is exactly the same on Kinoite as it is on Silverblue, and that means that they can update them both at the exact same time with the same stuff that they had to put into them, without having to deal with, hey, I have to go update the stuff on Silverblue and then go do the exact same work slightly differently on Kinoite. That makes sense. And like, it's not, we're saying, I'm saying this like it's the future of Linux, but regular Linux isn't going to go away like tomorrow or even 20 years from now. You're still going to be able to download Gentoo and do all of your compiling as much as you want to. There's 0%.
I mean, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like, all you're saying is that for the majority of people in the future, they'll probably be running an immutable file system.
Because it's so much easier for developers. I think that you're right that this doesn't give and from my experience over the last 2 months, this doesn't give regular users a lot of benefit. For developers, yes, if you're a developer, Kinoite and Silverblue are fantastic because it gives you an opportunity to mess around with containers and deal with the toolbox in both Silverblue and Kinoite in a way that you can then kind of start working on developing your own containerized applications. That's the reason why it's really good there, and it makes it easier for you to test software too, because you know that the underlying system where all of this stuff relies, that your application might rely on, is exactly the same no matter what computer it's on, right? So for developers, it makes a ton of sense. For regular everyday users, I don't think you and I are going to care. Like we're tinkerers, right? And that's the reason why I said earlier that it makes me sad for the future of Linux, is because one of the reasons why I like Linux so much is because you have control over everything. Like if you want to go delete your Etsy file, you can do that. I mean, you have a broken computer at the end of it, but you could do it if you wanted to do that. With this, you couldn't. There's no way you don't have access to the Etsy file or directory. It's just not there. Well, I mean, it's there, but you can't delete it.
Dude, you're very right. I think for us, it's just going to be, we now have, like, I think the sad part is if you're right and immutable file systems do become more popular, and more distributions switch over to them, that just means we're going to have, like, a lot of the distributions that we, like, or maybe spin-off distributions, like, let's say, like, Arch doesn't go immutable file system, but, like, most Arch derivatives, like Arco, Endeavor, all of them start switching over to more immutable file systems and everything. I think, like, it'll be sad for us just because we'll lose out on how much we enjoy that distro. But I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think for most people it will be better, and my thing would be is if we have any software developers in this live stream, come over to, like, if you would come and message me on my Discord personally or in programming chat or something like that, and let me know if software development wise an immutable file system makes your life easier, or at least potentially easier. Because my thinking is, like, if it's an immutable file system, if you're an actual Linux distro developer, it obviously makes your life easier, because when you're updating a system, you don't really have to worry about someone, like, changing out different core aspects of the system and in an upgrade cycle that causing some issue for them.
Ripping out system D.
Yeah. Like, you don't really have to worry about any crazy crap like that going on when you push out an update for all your users. But I don't see it making software development that much more easy. It might make it easier in some ways, but from what I've been told about software development, the aspect that helps the most is the containerization, with having libraries, not like you specifying the libraries you need and no one accidentally changing or updating or whatever.
The thing about that is that you got to remember, I'm not a developer, so I haven't been able to test any of that stuff. Like the toolbox functionality of Kinoite is there, and it's basically, I don't even really know how to explain it because I haven't been able to use it in its intended use. Like I've created a toolbox where you can install apps through because like DNF does not work on Kinoite, right? Because that's how you would install on regular Fedora. You use RPM Austri and Kinoite and Silverblue, but you can use DNF inside of a toolbox to install software. And the toolbox is like a containerized version of the operating system, like where you can actually make changes and stuff like that. And then you can, I'm just assuming here that you can, if you're inside of that toolbox, then you can do your development work inside of there and kind of like emulate certain, I don't even know. It's really hard to explain, and I can't explain it well because I'm not a developer. So I don't know what the actual benefits of this for a developer are. From what I've heard other people say is that it's easier or better to do development work on a immutable file system. Now, somebody in the chat said that containerized applications and immutable file systems aren't the same thing. We know that. Like we're not trying to say that they're the same thing, but they definitely do go hand in hand. Like there's a reason why the primary way of installing applications on Silverblue and Kinoite is Flatpak or Flatpak. If you're using Ubuntu Core,
they're not related, but they might as well be. Right. You know, like they're used in tangent with each other a lot.
Because trust me, if the only way to install software on Kinoite was to use RPM Austri, no one would ever use it, because you'd have to reboot your computer after every single installation. That's worse than Windows, by the way. That'd be worse than using Windows, because at least with Windows there are some applications that you can just use without rebooting. It'd be like installing a virus software on your Windows machine every single time, because you have to reboot it after every single. It'd be horrible. Doing it once, you're not supposed to use RPM Austri. You're supposed to use Flatpak. That's the reason why it's acceptable that RPM Austri does things that way. Gosh, It's Art says that it's basically desktop and Android on desktop. That's exactly it. Because Android has an immutable operating system.
Yeah.
And to go along with both Tyler and my point, it makes it hard to use Android as an enthusiast because you don't have access to all the cool bits. Like you have to root your files, you root your phone in order to install really cool, awesome pieces of software. You know what I mean? And that is why it makes me a little sad that this could be the future of Linux, and that it makes it harder. It makes it feel like it's taking part of what makes Linux good. You know what I mean? Part of the things that makes Linux like fantastic for the enthusiasts. I'm not talking about regular people. I mean, I'm talking about nerds.
Actually, hold on. I think it's better, instead of saying makes it good, makes it fun for us.
Yeah, exactly.
It's much more like the way Android and like Fedora, Silverblue, and everything is going. Is it's a safer environment for users in general. Like you're not as likely to break things. You're also, the things that you're using are less likely to break themselves. It's the whole system around is just safer, but it makes it less fun when you want to like play with shit.
Yeah.
Like.
Jane in the chat says you can apply live with the RPM Austri thing. I am aware of that. I just don't remember it when I use it, and because you're not supposed to use it very often, right? You use it to like install HTOP or something. You know what I mean? You're not going to use it for the vast majority of your software comes from FlatHub and Flatpak, and that's fine. That's the way it's supposed to work. So that's the reason why I never remember the live patch thing. So anyways, he also asked, did we read the chat? Obviously we just read the chat, so boom.
We don't do it nearly as often as we should throughout the podcast.
Yes.
Just because we already get on tangents ourselves, so we don't need help from chat.
The chat talked about Amish for like 5 minutes after we were done, so that's the reason why we don't read the chat. That was our fault. We spawned. Well, yeah, but still, anyways. Okay, so
but to bring it back to containers, would you agree with this statement? Containerization is only going to get more popular in Linux.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm right there with you. I think it's going to get more popular, and I think for most use cases, it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Although, if containerization becomes the point, like, or if it becomes the way that open source like developers only, like they only package their software as containers, or in container, like, flat packs, snaps, if that's the only way that you're going to distribute your code and you call it open source, but that's the only way someone can get, you don't like allow someone to just compile it, or at least do the regular stuff that most reasonable
I don't think that that's going to happen, because most developers use some form of Git to do their stuff, which means all of their software is going to be there. You would just then have to, they may not provide instructions on how to build it, but you could if you wanted to. You know what I mean? You can download anything from Git and build it if you want, if you have the knowledge to do so.
I don't know. I think a lot of the people who are against the future of having more and more things available as containers, or primarily installed as containers, I think the people who are scared of it are also the people that are, the reason they're afraid of it comes from the fear of, well, what if they stop giving instructions, or people stop focusing on making it not easy, but at least explaining it and making it easy for someone who can follow directions to compile and install from source. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do understand the fear, and I don't think it's something to completely not worry about. Like, I think it's something to still talk about and ensure that developers at least hear people talking about it, because it's kind of important to be like, if everything is going to be super easy to get as containers, that's great. But for the people who want it from source, who want to tweak it or do that, it still there should be an emphasis on allowing that to be easy, or at least having it documented.
Yeah. The real problem is going to come not with the ability to build stuff from source, which I do think will probably be a little bit of an issue, but the real issue is going to be the fact that we have at least three ways of containerizing this thing. And in true Linux fashion, most applications you want can be available through all three different ways. So you can get it from a snap, you can get it from a Flatpak, you can get it from an app image. You can do those things. Like if you want Firefox, you can get it all three ways if you want, whatever way. The problem is that they're all going to be maintained by different people. So the person who maintains the snap version of Firefox and the person who maintained the snap or the Flatpak version of Firefox, they're two different people, and one may be more reliable at keeping something up to date than the other. So if you're using like the Flatpak version of Firefox, you may be like, this is just an example, you might be like a version behind than the version of Snap, which is the official version. Same thing with OBS. OBS has an official version in FlatHub, right? That's where you're supposed to get OBS from. There's also a Snap version of OBS, but it's maintained by somebody different. So you may be a version or two behind. Also, they're going to be compiled in different ways. So the Snap version of OBS has a ton of plugins already installed for you. It's, kind of the reason why people would want to use the Snap. It's really good. But the Flatpak version is not going to have that. It's just going to be the regular old Flatpak version of OBS. So that's going to be an issue that we're going to kind of have to face, is that you're going to have three systems where they all have the same applications probably, but they're maintained by different people. They're compiled in different ways and have different features attached to them, at least in some cases. It's not as big of a deal if you're talking about like a really simple application. If you're talking like Flameshot or something, I'm not going to worry about. But things like OBS, where there are different flags that you can compile it with, so that it has different features like the browser plugin and animation plugins and all this stuff, like support for NVENC and stuff like that. You can compile it in different ways. You're going to have to, it makes an extra, or at least a different decision about how you download your software, because in order for that system to work, you kind of have to have a knowledge that those things are different. And the idea behind containerization is twofold. We've already talked about it in terms of developers a lot. Like, it makes it easier for developers to do things because they can compile all the stuff into a container, including all the libraries, not worrying about different version numbers and stuff like that. That's the reason why it's good for developers. For users, it means that it's really all the libraries are there. You don't have to worry about it. But most users, most new users at least, they don't know where they download their software from. They open up their Ubuntu thing, close their eyes, and then change the wallpaper. And then they go into the software store, download a piece of software. They don't know that thing comes from Snap or the Debian repositories or Flatpak. I mean, obviously, those things aren't enabled on Ubuntu, but you get the idea. You just download a piece of software. They don't care what version it is. They just download it. That's the way most people get their software. And that's a good thing, right? But it also means that once they get past that idea, they're going to have some extra issues. Like if they move from Ubuntu to, say, Silverblue or Ubuntu to Fedora, the way they do they might download OBS on both of those things and realize that, hey, you know, the OBS version on Ubuntu and the OBS version on Fedora, completely different. You know, either they're different versions or they have different things enabled, and that is going to make it a little bit harder for people to move around on Ubuntu, or at least, maybe not harder, but more complex, at least a little bit. So, yeah. Wow.
I don't know. I think the I don't know. Really, in all honesty, I think the Flatpak snaps and everything, the debate between which one is going to like win out and see the best development, or really the most development focus. I think one of them is going to have to win out eventually. Like, not saying that like the others will just fall into obscurity and like completely wither and die, but they will just fall into that obscurity where they're still available. There's still plenty of them around, but they're not a focus.
Yeah, see, I disagree with that completely. And the reason why is because Flatpak has technically won at this moment we're in right now, but Canonical has a lot of money. And they're the most stubborn mules in the world. So that means Snaps is going to be continuing to be there for a long, painfully slow time on Ubuntu. And Ubuntu, whether you like it or not, is still probably the distro that most people download for the first time. No. That's the reason why Snaps is going to I think you're probably right in that, like, Flatpak, like outside of the Ubuntu world, Flatpak is going to be the thing. You know, we were pretty much there. App images never had a chance. Sorry, app image guys. Like, I made a video about app images, and man, did that piss a lot of people off.
I'm one of the app image guys, man. I freaking love app images, but I will admit, like, no, they've lost. Like I'm not gonna get into that because that pissed a lot of people off. Like they did not like that video at all. But the point is, like, Flatpak everywhere else outside of Ubuntu, definitely going to be the thing. Inside of Ubuntu, Snaps is the thing. Like, it's going to be the thing for a long time because I don't see Canonical ever admitting defeat in that area because they want that control. Because you got to remember, whereas Flatpaks were created for the desktop, they were created for us. You know, the people who use Linux. Snaps weren't created for us. They were created for enterprise and servers. That's where they were created for, and that's where they work really well. They were adapted to work for Ubuntu desktop, and that's the reason why they have so many problems, because they weren't really meant for Ubuntu desktop. And because they were developed for the enterprise, and that's where Ubuntu makes their money, and they want all of that control, they're not going to be abandoning Snaps anytime soon, if ever. Well, sadly. I mean, I as far as control, I don't know, because hasn't Ubuntu or Canonical open sourced the server side of Snaps now too?
No.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
No, still the Snap store or whatever it's called is still proprietary.
Okay. Well, all right. See, like, the thing is like, I don't know, man. Like, I know Ubuntu and Canonical are stubborn as shit, and they're going to continue with Snaps. But I think Flatpak should just be the way that everything's done. It's really not a difficult task to get Flatpak set up on pretty much any distro.
Well, you and I can we agree on that. You and I also both think that Linux and open source is amazing. We both agree on this. That's the reason why we do the podcast, right? And one of the things about open source software in general is that anybody can do whatever they want. That's the reason why we have 14 different package managers and 300 or 3,000 different distributions. You know, say what you want. The differences between, you know, Elementary OS and Ubuntu on a fundamental level aren't that much. You know, they both use the same kernel, they both use the same package manager. One's a little bit more restrictive than the other, but they basically are the same. But one is still a different distribution. You know, you know, they broke off from Ubuntu. You know, same thing with Linux Mint, Arco Linux, you know, Manjaro, all these things. That's the reason why we have so many different things. And that's the reason why we're never, ever, ever, ever going to agree on just a single thing. And whether or not we even want to is a debatable. Like, if we said we just all have to use this one thing, like, there's a reason why so many people hate System D, right? System D is fantastic. Like, it really works really good. And everybody, like, you and I both agree, everyone should use System D. Like, at least every new user should just use System D. But there is a very a very small community that absolutely hates System D. They won't use it, so they'll use Run It, or they'll use OpenRC or sysvianet. If you're gonna use, I mean, you know all about sysvianet, Tyler. You and your LFS adventure, you know. I mean, that's the reason why. Like, we can. There are no standards in the Linux community, and there never will be. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's a bit of both.
Well, see, I kind of just, so like, my point wasn't that anything was going to, and I know you know this, but just in case anyone misunderstood what I was saying, it's not that I think like I personally think flat packs are going to win out by like majority use, like that's what most people use. And I feel like app images, which pretty much already have, but app images and snaps will kind of fade more into obscurity. They're obviously still going to exist. People still use them, swear by them, whatever. Like, they'll be there, but it'll be much more of a niche thing. There's not many people that rely on them.
So do you think that what will end up happening is that because the vast majority of people use Flatpak, the vast majority of developers will develop for Flatpak only? Is that what you're?
No. That'll be where their focus is. Like, they might, you know, like a good example is like OpenRA or Zero AD, like games like that, those open source game like projects that are pretty big. Like, they'll probably still release, because they're good at doing that. They give out multiple different versions and have multiple different software like containers and packages available. They'll still do that, but I think the majority of work will shift towards one. Like, you might have other ones that are available, but you know, the flat pack is the one that we guarantee you, like, this is the one that we work on. We know it works. If you install this, you're guaranteed to have a good time. Just like that, this is the one that we recommend. I think that will end up being Flatpak for most developers, and that's what they use as a standard. Kind of the same way that Ubuntu is like the unspoken standard of Linux. Like, if you're going to pick something to like release to everybody, most of the times you make your guide based off of Ubuntu, or you focus your development around Ubuntu. I kind of think that's going to happen more with Flatpaks. I don't think Ubuntu is going to be the same way with the desktop anymore. Like, I kind of feel like
the death of Ubuntu. Sad. Because of snaps. Snaps killed Ubuntu.
I think Canonical killed Ubuntu. And
snaps were just a weapon.
I don't think it's anything that they did to, like, I don't think they've made like egregious mistakes on the desktop, but it's just because of their core focus on enterprise.
Yeah.
They're losing that touch on what people want on the desktop, or the ways that people want solutions fixed. Like, I mean, Snaps is a good solution to like, it's a container, so it's a solution for that, but it's not the solution or implementation for the solution that people want on the desktop. Like, people don't want a proprietary solution on the desktop for Ubuntu. Like, you're
I mean,
you're
to
kind of
be
catering to open
fair,
source.
most of Snaps is open source. It's just the store part of this proprietary. But that proprietary little bit is like the proprietary little bit at the beginning of Vivaldi. You know what I mean? It's just like, technically, yeah, 90% of your browser is open source, but that 5% that's not is just going to piss a lot of people off. Okay, we really, really do have to stop. We've been going for an hour and 30 minutes, so it's time to move on to the last section of this of the podcast. Otherwise, we're going to be here for a while. We have no more time for tangents because we could talk about Ubuntu for quite a while, I'm sure. Maybe that's something that we should do in another episode. The Death of Ubuntu sounds like a really good title. Moving on to the last section of the pod, and this thing is creatively called Thingies of the Week. Now, we could have called this thing literally anything else because there are tons of options. We could have just stolen from someone else, but Thingies of the Week seems to have, kind of stuck. It's the thingy of the week. So, Tyler, your thingy of the week. I have a feeling I know what this
is, of course, Deadside. Been heavily addicted to this game. It's available on Steam right now. I believe they have it for like 40 or like 50% off. I can't remember how much it is. If you like survival games, it's a realistic survival game where there's base building, and the base building it's a small team of developers, I believe, based out of Russia or someplace I believe it's Russia. I'm not sure, but Russians typically make the best survival games, and it's extremely good.
A lot of real world experience there is what we're saying.
Look, they do a great job.
I'm still gonna get canceled by the end of the show. I'm just gonna put that out there.
It's a great game. If you like survival games, I recommend you check it out. There's no like zombies or anything in it like that. There's just AI that patrols roads, and you can go and do missions. You get a whole bunch of loot. It's multiplayer. It's a fantastic game. All I'll say is that we are on a Linux cast, so I have to go ahead and let you know it does not run on Linux as far as I know. They still have not. They use Easy Anti-Cheat, and because of that, it doesn't work. Even though, if you don't know this, Easy Anti-Cheat now supports Linux. There's an option that they can click to enable it. So if you look at the game, you're interested in it, you like it, I recommend you purchase it and then just leave them a review or send them a message. They are active. They have a Discord. They're fantastic over there. Go over there and let them know that you'd like to play the game a lot, but you run Linux and they need to enable support. And hopefully if enough people want to play the game and let the devs know, and they hear enough people asking for it, they'll do the simple work to do it. But they're a small team. They're working on getting vehicles added in the game. They've got a lot of work to do, and it's a great game. I recommend checking it out.
Jonathan, the name of the game was Deadside.
Deadside, yes.
Yeah. And you're right, it's on Steam. Okay, so mine is an oldie but a goodie, and it's Time Shift. So I've been messing around getting prepared to make a video about ButterFS, and it's turned into a complicated thing because ButterFS is one of those things that you really need to explain really well, and I don't want to make that video and realize that I got half the shit wrong. So I'm in the process of that, and so I never had actually used Time Shift before. Usually I used a couple other tools to do my snapshots and stuff like that. But Time Shift has been proving to be really kind of good. Even on a window manager where it doesn't really look all that great, it just functions really nice. It does weekly. I've set it up for weekly backups, and it does the weekly snapshots just like it normally would. And I also go in there every time I update and do a snapshot by myself. I prefer to use, God, I can never remember the thing that I usually use. Snappers. I think it's Snapper. In the command line, that sets it up so that it does it automatically when you do an update. It might not be called that, could be misremembering it, but I'm just decided to try Time Shift because that's a GUI tool that people can use to create ButterFS snapshots. So it does, if you are not on ButterFS and you want to use it for a backup tool, you can still use it. It just uses rsync instead. So okay, yes. You guys are funny in the chat. You're all 14-year-old boys. Okay.
Anybody who wears a hat indoors, I'm like,
I know a lot of people wear hats indoors. Now, if he was wearing sunglasses, I'd be worried a little bit. Like, what are you hiding behind the sunglasses?
major douche move.
like he obviously has bloodshot eyes and didn't want anybody to know. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so those are the thingies of the week. So that is it for the Linux cast this week. Coming up next week, we're doing let's see here. Is Linux too customizable? That should be a good one. That's a good question.
Follow up for this one.
Yeah, so that is coming up next week. If you want to watch us live, we do this show every Friday at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern time or thereabouts. It's usually around quarter after by the time we actually get our asses in gear and actually hit the live button. But we do record every Friday around that time. If you want to watch live, remember if you want to submit user feedback to do so at the email address email at thelinuxcast.org. You can do that there, and we will get to some of your user feedback next week. We're going to do that every other week, so that should be fun. Before I go, I should take a moment to thank my current patrons, and you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/linuxcast. Thanks to everybody who does support me on Patreon and YouTube. I truly do appreciate it. I can't even begin to tell you how thankful I am. Also, if you are interested, you can support Patreon. Tyler on Patreon too. He has a Patreon page as well. That link will be in the. I think I have that link on the website. I'm not actually sure. But anyways, thanks for everybody who supports me on Patreon and YouTube. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.